Hey, it's John Nolan here. One of the most important things in my life is the health and the well-being of my family. And one of the products that we absolutely love to use and have had amazing results with is Z-Stack. It's Dr. Zelenko's Immune Booster, and it really does the job absolutely well. Now, as most of you know, Dr. Zelenko recently passed away, but he's left behind a legacy with Z-Stack and his other products, and also the Dr. Zelenko Freedom Foundation. So every time you purchase Z-Stack to help boost your immune system and the immune system of your family, 10% of the profits will also automatically go to the Freedom Foundation. So I encourage you to check it out, Z-Stack by Dr. Zelenko. Use the link and the coupon code in the description, save, and also help the foundation. Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, it's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for joining us again for another inspired conversation. I know many of you are very excited about this one. We welcome back a very special friend of the Inspired channel, filmmaker, researcher, truth seeker, freedom fighter. There's so many great things to say about this guest, Frank Jacob. Thank you so much for joining us for a 10th time on the Inspired channel.
Hey, John, good to be back. Wow, has it been 10?
This is number 10. It's 10? Like we have a kind of a special celebration today.
Well, that's cool. Where's the cake and the champagne?
Yeah, well, Frank, yesterday I scrolled through our videos, and I think since this spring when we had our first conversation, when you and I talked for the first time, our conversations have been viewed way over 2 million times. We're over 2 million viewers on all these conversations in the past months. And you were a busy man before. You were a filmmaker, researcher, doing great things. But lately, you've also embarked on a speaking tour. What has changed in these last months in your life?
Well, it's just been overwhelming in a way that it's nothing I planned or expected would happen this year. But it just seems like once we started these conversations about timelines and the whole looking glass material, it just seems to be a topic that is resonating with a lot of people. And I'm getting that not just, through the shows that I've been on, apart from our shows together, there's been many others, but also now, like you mentioned, the speaking tour I was invited to for the last month, every weekend, to go to some congress or to some conference, or even just solo events where people invited me to come and talk about these subjects to people live. And that was a whole other energy, which I thought was just fantastic. I loved that. And it was just being close to people, getting that eye-to-eye contact, and noticing that when you strike a chord with somebody, sometimes it isn't always a pleasant thing. Also, sometimes people, I had people coming up to me in the breaks and stuff like that, saying, "Is this going to get positive? Otherwise we're going to leave." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not done yet. We have to go through the whole spectrum, right? It's positive, negative. That's just the way everything is. We can't just be polarized toward one thing." And I think that we made that clear in our talks. We're going into all these directions and we're breaking them down, we're analyzing them, and that's been pretty exciting. And I think it's caught on fire, so to speak, on the web.
Which I think is amazing, and thankfully translates into the analog physical reality where you get together with many people. And speaking of which, many people are getting together around the world. We see this. I mean, the mainstream or the legacy media isn't really reporting on that because they don't want that. But whether you look at Central Europe, Czech Republic or France or the Netherlands, Germany, protests, and I mean tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. Then there's Asian countries. We have, it's just exploding everywhere. What are you observing in Germany and where you are moving about? What are you observing in people at this point?
There's a lot of that going on over here too. Obviously, we heard about the farmers and things that are going on in the Scandinavian countries, where there seems to be a little bit more resistance. Unfortunately, in the German-speaking countries, it seems to have, kind of simmered down to the same old people that were hardcore resistors before, trying to open and get information up to the public. They're still doing it, but it's just people get wore down after a while, and it was the summer. And I've noticed a lot of people that were pushing during the lockdown days, as soon as they loosened up, it was like, oh, we can plan our holidays now. And so they all planned their holidays and they went on holidays and they were like, on break. Cause they're like, I've had it. I can't take it anymore. And unfortunately, that's a bit of a drag because, the other side's not going on holidays and taking it easy. They're pushing it because they're a larger team, better funded. And, we have that to go up against. So going on holidays to get a breather, I guess, is good. But at the same time, it makes you wonder why some people have priorities and strange places. Mm-hmm. And I can understand the idea of going on vacation and how important it is. But when I think back on my life, in the harder years where I was like, where there was days where I didn't know if I was going to have a meal. And I've been on those hardcore days. I've had that experience in my life. And there were years where there was no discussion about vacation. There just was no vacation. The whole idea of vacation, that's like for people that are in a feel-good society, right? And I think that maybe some people don't really take it so seriously that actually what is coming is really hardcore. We're really talking about stuff here that is monumental. It's epic. What we're going through right now is like, it's about, it's a line between, do you believe that your creator being, do you believe that the universe was created, that there's some higher power, God, however whatever, by whatever name you call that? Or do you believe in the materialistic world and, in that direction? Because that, those are the two polarities that we're facing right now, and they're facing off. Because, whichever side it tips toward is going to be what we call the consensus timeline. It's going to be that where the majority of people are going to flow and everyone's going to be sucked into that timeline. And we have a chance to create our timeline, but we have to create it actively. And we have to choose, where our attention is. And I'm noticing that one of the things that I've been doing over here on the side is working with a German biophysicist on certain special shows and like reality breakdowns and I'm learning a lot of stuff through some of the information that he's been putting out, which I'd love to share with you today. And a lot of it is about our attention. Like our attention is kind of the new currency. And it's because wherever you put your attention is where you're giving your energy. And, not only in the sense that there are actual patents, we've talked about that in some of our other shows, that actually use your body and your bioscience as feedback, biofeedback devices to collect data and put it into the system. That's one way of looking at it. But the other end of attention is your spiritual attention. And what your body is going through. Like, are you listening to what are you feeling? Are you feeling the emotions? Are you feeling your body? Are you in touch with your mental state like every day, or are you just kind of coasting? Are you focused? All these, are you distracted? And the thing is that I think we tend to forget that we're being helped by the cosmos. And that's one of the things that I've learned in the last few weeks is that the cosmos is actually there with us because we're kind of connected to it, and it's helping us with specific things that will actually energize us and will give us the push that we need to make a timeline happen that moves more into the spiritual direction. So those are the things that I've noticed over here anyway that are going on.
I think that's a beautiful observation, especially what you just said about the cosmos being of assistance. I think ultimately speaking, and we speak from perspective of beings that do know, I know we are creator beings, both created by a higher power and endowed with at least a fraction of that higher power as creators ourselves. And as such, I do believe that the cosmos actually, and that energy, it does always strive for harmony. It wants to harmonize itself. And when something's out of harmony, I think that's what you're touching on right now. We're getting this. However, the signals as they're being translated in our physical world don't appear that way. Because transformation is an uncomfortable, it's an uncomfortable thing that we go through. So what are you, in terms of data, observations, what have you learned and how do you think it's affecting us?
Well, just on the thing about the dark stuff that you're talking about, the negative stuff, it's like you could look at it as a kind of catalytic converter. You know how catalytic converters in the car work, right? They siphon out the toxins and set them aside, so the dark stuff is there for us to kind of use as a kind of negative catalytic converter. So it helped us to clarify, to get a better picture of reality, of what's going on around us, in order to make a decision about, okay, that's not something that I resonate with. And what we're noticing in terms of data is that it's something that's been going on for a while now. It actually has to do with the Earth's magnetosphere. And the Earth's magnetosphere has been getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And what happens, it's interesting that when the magnetosphere gets weak, there are physical phenomenon which have to do with how it affects us consciously. They've done tests in Russia, for example, with when they were testing astronauts that were going outside of the Earth's magnetosphere, and they noticed they were having like psychic experiences. And they were feeling things that were like they were having telepathic abilities. And it increases these capabilities. And if you're not used to that, it could be a little bit confusing. So, but it's interesting because somebody published a book here. I'll show you some interesting stats. Like there's a book called The Solar Wind and Hallucinations. I mean, I don't know if I like that word hallucination so much, but really you could also call it visionary experiences. And so what this is showing here is on one of the, over here on this chart, you're seeing hallucinations, and you're also seeing the magnetic index. And if you look at those two lines, you're seeing exact correlation, a coherence exactly between the visionary capabilities that we have and the geomagnetic sphere. So we are, definitely locked into resonating with that aspect of the Earth. And these data here, for example, are right now, this is from yesterday, and we're up at a KP index, which is, peaking at around 6, which means we're getting hit right now with a very, very powerful geomagnetic energy that's coming at us. So that is definitely something which is going to affect us. People are going to be affected differently by what they experience, and depending on how sensitive you are as a person. But I think the most interesting development that that we're going to be facing is something which I think a lot of people have been talking about for many years, and that is that they're expecting there's going to be some kind of a pole shift.
Well, before we go into the pole shift, because this is the big rabbit hole here, because we've been hearing about this not for years, for decades, right? And in some ways for centuries. I want to quickly rewind just a little bit about what you said, this correlation between the Earth's electromagnetic sphere and the further away you apparently are from it, or if you have the ability to break through it, even in this realm, you are perceiving extrasensory impressions, which means you can telepathy, visions, channeling, whatever you want to call it. I've long suspected that there is an artificial grid, an artificial electromagnetic grid that keeps us locked in our senses, right? Do you think this is the natural realm, this electromagnetic sphere that keeps us locked in? Or do you also think that it might be an artificial grid that keeps us in this slave state? Because when we're only able to perceive the physical reality around us, we're very limited in our abilities.
Well, I think you have to look at it as a kind of a carrier. We all agreed to come here. We have a spirit that just decided to, incarnate into a body and have a soul and have all these experiences to learn from. And at some point in that experience, like all avatars that have gone through, their own awakening process. It's interesting that there were tests made that showed that the IQ level, the percentage of the brain. A guy actually did a study. I think his name is McCalloway. He actually did a study that showed that between scientists like brainy types and shamans, and the brainy types were using 10% of their brain, which is more on average more than most people, which use between 7 and 10. Guess how much the shamans were using?
I don't know, 50?
No, okay, 25 to 48, depending. Okay, but come on, like seriously, a gap, a serious gap, up to 5 times as much of the brain capacity. So what I'm getting at is that at everyone's evolutionary level, you take a step back and you realize that you're not the body, that you're actually a spirit. having a human experience, which is kind of a cliched thing we've all heard, but it's really true. And so, yes, there's the magnetosphere that's keeping us, embodied, inside that bubble. And some people talk about simulations, and we can talk about that a little bit later, maybe too. But in the end, it's all relative. It doesn't matter, what form it takes, because what matters is that your consciousness is aware that you are above just that you are actually a manifestation vehicle. Like, you are actually able to create things that are beyond just, the logical, if I do A, then I get B. And that's the stage that everyone is destined to hit at some point. Maybe not the NPCs, in the world around us, like if you want to lean on that simulation reality thing. But even those will at some point awaken. Everybody has that point where they awaken, and it's an individual process. I think you have to accept that. Oops, what happened there? Oh, my computer's been freaking out.
Rang, Jacob.
Yeah, that was a sign from the universe, right?
Went dark, my friend.
Yeah, so everyone has that moment where they wake up, and so it's basically coming down to that. Is it relevant? Is it really relevant? What you call it is the question. Yeah,
I do understand what you're saying, and not to beat a dead horse here, but I think the question that so many people are having, perhaps it's our language that prohibits us. We think of simulation as, well, this is computer generated, when we perhaps cannot perceive the power that is behind such a experiment, if you will. I think the question that most people are having is whether this is a prime creator created, whether that's created by the prime creator who created everything, or whether there's other beings involved that have intercepted our perception in that way and created this artificial reality. I just think it's something further to explore and interesting. But
right. But you got to remember, just to cut you off here, it's like we have agreements. We have soul agreements or spirit agreements with all forms of interaction that we're going to be encountering. And even people that are having extraterrestrial abductions, they all say the same thing. Okay, here it goes again. I don't know what's going on with my computer, but it's freaking out. They all have to say the same thing, that in the end, they realize that they had a kind of an agreement with these beings before they even came here to go through that process. So I think it comes down to, are you a victim or are you a creator? Right. And if you're a victim, that means that something is being done to you. And if you're a creator, it means you've orchestrated the events in order for you to have the highest level of evolutionary experience. And whenever you make that decision, whenever you realize that you actually called all those things into your life, then you are assuming the creator role. And then you are realizing that it takes the power away from any kind of, victimhood that you may have had the perception that you're the victim of some circumstance. It turns that on its head. And then you realize, oh my God, that actually I am not the victim, that those were all protagonists, bit players or extra characters, which were manifested by the creator through me as a mini creator that's connected to the whole.
I absolutely agree with you. And that's being shown in something like family constellation therapy, these energetic patterns and what happens and how both a perpetrator and a victim always belong together in that sense, what you just talked about. There's an agreement and something is being played out, and so it can be healed, and so it can be, you can elevate consciousness to the next level. I totally agree with that. I believe in our physical experience, it's like walking on the razor's edge. You have your physical reality, you have a greater consciousness reality. They both belong together, and keeping that balance, I think, is what our life is kind of about. So speaking of balance, right. Things going out of balance, the pole shift, right? This has been really on and off, a hot topic in our broader community, then off again, on again. But you're saying this might be imminent.
Yes, I want to show you guys something, because this isn't something you're going to see in the mainstream news at all. Okay. There's this guy called Gene. He's a scientist. He's got a company, like an observatory, calls Mavstar Observatory. I would highly recommend you check out that link up there and go source it for yourself. But as you can see on this diagram here in the top left, this is the progression of the North Pole moving south. That's been taking place since, about these measurements here go back to 1860, and then eventually you come up to here where we're up at 2018, and where this black line is where the official source of this information decided to stop publishing the information, interestingly. And this guy, Gene, and his group of scientists decided that they weren't satisfied, and they put together their own resources and have begun to monitor this thing on a daily basis. And so this has been, and what you see in this red square right here is blown up over here. And you're seeing, these are the jumps of the pole that have been taking place for this year, and you can see it's accelerating. And it's getting to the point now where in the very beginning, like maybe 10 years ago or 12 years ago, we were doing solar revolution, and we were talking about the pole shift and the pole moving about 30 kilometers per year. Now we are moving 5 miles per month,
which is roughly around 8-9 kilometers per month. So we're
per month.
So we're
exactly
at over 100 kilometers per year. So more than 3 times.
More than 3 times the speed. And this diagram here, this line, this yellow line that you see right here, is the remaining distance, and it's only 36 miles to this 40-degree mark. And, so what's with the 40-degree mark? I guess you're asking. Well, the 40-degree mark is interesting because at the 40-degree mark, I'm going to show you this, is something happens. Nobody knows, we've never been alive for this, none of us. We've never witnessed it, but this scientist put together a little experiment, and I'm going to show you basically how that works. And what you're seeing here on the left here of this compass is this would be, for example, the inner Earth's magnetic point, the North Pole. As the North Pole reaches the 40-degree mark, you see what happens. It flips.
And what is the significance of the flip? What happens when the poles flip? And how fast does that happen? Is that kind of this is the question. In weather terms, is this like where summer turns into ice age all of a sudden? Is this where basically there's a real upside down movement? What can we expect?
Well, nobody knows for sure. That's the cool thing. So in 7 months' time, if this continues unabatedly, we're going to experience what happens. But there's 2 things generally that is agreed upon that could happen. One of them is just a magnetic pole reversal. And what that means is that if the speed of the pole is significantly rapid, then the magnetic and the South Pole and the North Pole will just flip in a very, very fast way, like really within hours. And it'll be so fast that, given the size of the Earth, it will only change the polarity of the Earth. And this has happened before.
Do we know when it's happened before exactly?
Well, yeah, I'll get to that. Basically, this happens in cycles. And but there's another version. If it goes in another direction, if it goes slower, then what happens is that the charge, the magnetic charge of the actual matter of the planet is linked to the magnetosphere, of course, and it will move the Earth. So we could be bathing in oceans, basically, in mountainous terrain. Not a very pretty scenario, of course, means that cataclysmic type of thing, and I talked about that in A Tale of Two Timelines. And this is more evidence, this is current evidence, which is talking about the cataclysmic version, right? So, this is a game changer here right now. And this is something we all need to prepare for, John. I think everyone should be taking steps to prepare for the worst, not in the ideology of, panic, fear, but just to be smart. I think you did a show the other day or a couple of days ago about preparedness. And I looked in on it a little bit, and you did some excellent pointers about what to do, get some food storage and things like that. These are things that are just smart. We should all be right now in these times, we should be smart about what we're investing our consciousness and our time in, of course, right? So whatever happens, if it even happens in 7 months, there's factors that could get in the way of that. We don't know. And the other thing that we know is that through the communication of the J-rods that they learned when the looking glass, with the looking glass material, they learned that consciousness actually can affect the outcome as well. So this is a third factor, that we're not just victims, but that when we raise our consciousness, if collectively enough people on the planet have raised their vibration, their consciousness, then they actually feedback loop it to the universe, and it's kind of a signal, that's going to affect the kind of energy that's coming at us, because we are basically, because of this magnetosphere weakening. The next thing I want to talk to you about and show you is what that means on a spiritual level and how that is supporting us. But it's important to know that this pole stuff is coming and it's inevitable if this continues at the rate it's going. And as you saw that line, it's been going steady for decades. And it's speeding up, and it has been speeding up regularly, and it's getting to the point where it could exponentially, the last few days, weeks, it could boom, and then we're looking at that. So don't be in fear, but just be prepared that, start setting yourself, a reminder that in half a year's time or so, that you go into a meditation about this, and you think about, you connect with Mother Earth. Sounds corny, but let's say, Mother Earth is a being, and I think that we are beginning to understand on at least a quantum physics level that things are connected on a quantum level, including the Earth and the stars and the sun and all those things. So this is something we all need to be prepared about and should be ready for.
Actually, this points so clearly to, and I don't know if you've read the books, but these are books that we constantly talk about, the Ringing Cedars books by Vladimir Megre that were written in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s, a series of 10 books that is extremely powerful. And the protagonist in the books, and these are nonfiction books, by the way, is Anastasia, which is a woman living in the Siberian taiga and a direct descendant of our original prime culture with knowledge and wisdom that is beyond anything I have ever seen in another human. Because she never lost it. Her lineage has never lost it. But she also speaks about a cycle of constantly, of civilizations rising up, destroying themselves, and starting all over again. And it was her, at that time, it was her belief so that's 25, almost 30 years ago now, that we are at this time again. And it was her deepest desire to help humanity shift into a timeline that wouldn't need a cataclysm once again to reset itself. Like we've had these resets. Now we're talking about the Great Reset, but these resets have been happening. I mean, there's all the evidence in the world for that this continues to happen. And it is a direct reflection of the reincarnation cycle, which is also this constant coming back in the loop. So I think we are on a razor's edge. I still believe we can turn it around, like you said. I still believe this is a possibility. The closer we get, the more challenging it is to turn it around. But you can. You can, absolutely can. And the preparedness factor, I think, for people that live in hurricane zones, that's a no-brainer. They're always prepared. I mean, that's just the logical thing to do. But aside from the physical preparedness, what do you suggest can people do to solidify and really manifest this a timeline that allows for this huge transformation without mass extinction?
Well, I want to get to that because I want us to, from the very beginning, when we started talking about timelines, I'm trying to, I really want people to understand that the timeline will happen when you visualize the timeline, that it's not just going to happen on its own. And that's a big thing that I noticed that was going on in the blogosphere and the web out there, that people had this idea that, we're already on the timeline now. We've already done it. We've made the shift. We're already moving to fifth dimension. And that's just, I'm sorry that I just don't agree with that. Everything I'm learning and everything that I'm researching is pointing exactly to the fact that we're on two timelines right now, and we have, we still have the possibility. And that's why in the looking glass, they can never see anything past 2030 because, it's still not decided. And it can only make sense right now that there's two timelines, because basically there are these two conflicting ideas that I mentioned earlier. The materialist timeline, which is manifesting in terms of the the transhumanism, and the ultimate AI society, which includes all of the dark stuff that we've been exploring in some of our other shows, and the natural, organic, full potential human timeline, which has been also predicted and expected to happen and wants to happen. And like Anastasia's example is perfect. It is this idea of getting on a timeline that's away from the cataclysm. And even the J-Rod, talked about that potential, that we actually have the potential to have this experience where the cataclysm bypasses us. It either bypasses us physically, or we make a transition mentally to maybe other dimensions. Nobody really can define this because nobody really understands it. We've never been through this and come back to tell the tale. We all sense these things. We all can feel things from other dimensions that we're tapping into, knowledge and information in the Akashic records. But we have to, I think all of us be open to anything is game, and to define it.
Excuse me, it reminds me of Noah's Ark and how there's a perception of what that was. But Noah's Ark could have been a dimensional shift. It could have been a ship. There are so many potentials that we might not be able to, verbalize right now. But you're exactly correct, I think, in that if we are at a vibrational level, we will experience it and we won't know what it is exactly until we get there.
No, and exactly the cool thing about it, and we got into it in Solar Revolution, our film was we had these test subjects that Rick Strassman had doing dimethyltryptamine directly injected. And because, Dieter was telling us, oh yeah, you're going to make this shift in another dimension. I'm like, well, what does it look like? I want to see what the thing looks like. So then I found out, like, he wanted us to interview Rick Strassman. So we did. And then I found out about this study that he'd done, this study group. And so we explored, their testimony, if you want to call it that, about what they experienced. And it had to do with dimethyltryptamine and the experience that these things in the brain, we have amazing mechanisms within our brain that are actually built to create those states, organs in our body, like the pineal gland and things.
Receptors, yeah.
And those are triggered by, coincidentally, specific frequencies. One of them being 150 megahertz, and that's what I'm going to show you next. Okay, if you look at this is something that I was given from Dieter. This is an astrophysicist that he knows that worked at Max Planck Institute. He's been tapping into the readings that they're getting out of the cosmos. And what you're seeing in this diagram here is basically at the galactic center, this red mark here in the middle. From there, we are being basically hit with a resonance frequency right now of 150 megahertz, which corresponds to the human DNA. And meaning that, as a musician, when something goes into resonance with something else, right? It creates, an exchange of information. And the higher the frequency is of anything, the higher the quality of information, just like sample rates, or like film frame rates. If it's 15 or 10 frames per second, the picture is going to be choppy. But if it's, 500 frames per second, it's going to be perfectly fluid and it's going to be way, way more information. And what we're seeing here is that this stuff, it's called the maser. Okay. And the maser means the microwave laser rays that are coming and gaining in intensity since 2019. And here on this, I want to show you as well, you can see here, this is where we're located, and this is the center of our galaxy. And there's a black hole at the center of our galaxy, and that black hole is also bringing information out of it. And the way it works is that the magnetosphere lines, they run along these arms. And if you look at where we are right now, we are right in between two of these arms. So we are actually getting on there's two things going on here. We are cycling between the galactic plane. We go above the galactic plane and we go below the galactic plane. And each of those cycles takes 13,000 years. So in total, 26,000 years. And right now we're right at the crossover point. And the last time that happened, 13,000 years ago, we had the flood. Okay, you were mentioning the flood, right? So here we are again, right? And what have we got? The magnetosphere has changed. And when the magnetosphere breaks down, and as you can see here, these are the solar cycles, the last 3 solar cycles that we've gone through. And over here, you see that the solar activity was much greater in the 90s, and it's been waning. And now this is us right here at 2020, and that's called a grand solar minimum. And when that happens, the actual ability, like the sun is in a way contracting its energy field. And when it contracts its energy field, the energy field that surrounds and encompasses us is called the heliosphere. And the heliosphere is a protector, like an envelope around us that protects us from cosmic radiations that would normally do a lot of damage, right? And you can see here that basically in the last, these are the cycles shown in different form, but you can see on this middle line right here that the cosmic rays, usually when the solar cycles go to a minimum, the heliosphere stays intact. So the cosmic rays diminish. And here you see it, they diminish. But here is now, what do you see here? They've gone above the line, so they're not diminishing. So we're being actually hit with things right now that we have never, ever been confronted with. That means that these particles that are coming at us, and the way this master physicist was talking about them, he calls them positrons. And positrons are the opposite of electrons. And so it's funny. It's almost like here again, the universe has a mechanism that is intended for us to, like, if a positron and a electron come together, it neutralizes it. So in a way, it's like it's also, it has a consciousness relation. It means that karma is neutralized. It means that we're resolving things. Things are basically completing. So it's really strange. Like, we're getting instantaneous information through scalar waves directly from the center of the galaxy instantaneously. And NASA even calls it sputtering in the upper atmosphere, which means that they're trying to figure out what the heck is going on a material level, because they're sensing incredible increases of temperature, increases of particles coming at us, anomalies like these wild cobalt lightnings that we've been, experiencing, that are meaning that the lightning, instead of going from the clouds to the earth, they go from the clouds 50 miles up into the ionosphere. These are things that have only really been witnessed since about 2007, actually, with the activation of CERN, incidentally, but they've been picking up and gaining in momentum ever since. And so, yeah, that's kind of what's going on. I mean, I'll get into it a little deeper, but maybe you want to say something.
No, I was just going to say, it's interesting to observe that you mentioned since 2019, the activity is increasing. And what I'm observing, and this is a theory, and chime, let me know what you think. But when this cosmic energy, if you want to take like a overarching term for it, this cosmic energy increases, we are primed for evolutionary leaps, consciousness leaps, right? So what I think this dark timeline side is doing is using this energy and trying to direct it into their objectives, distracting us. And so it's no coincidence that since 2019, we've been in a constant state of emergency worldwide. It hasn't stopped. We have gone from a somewhat normalized state. I mean, compared to now, it was normalized, to a constant emergency where we're not getting out of it here, which what it does is it keeps, like you in the beginning, like you said, it keeps our attention distracted. That's at least the aim. A lot of people are seeing through it and they're not allowing it, and they are taking control of it. But we also must understand that energy can always be used and transmuted in both ways. There's, it's the intention that so the cosmos gives us this positive wave, this amazing support system, but it's up to us, it's individual responsibility to use it properly and direct it properly. Do you see it in the same way?
You said it beautifully. I think that's why people need to hear this, because I think they need to know that these tools are available. These are tools. These are elements of our creation that are set up there and sitting there waiting for us to use them. And what I'm showing you here isn't stuff that you're going to see on the mainstream channels. And, even in a lot of scientific, levels, they're not talking about it in terms of consciousness, because the macro scale science, at least the science that deals with the material world, is based on atheism. And they don't believe in a God, in a creator. You played the Yuval Harari video, I think, recently again on your channel. I mean, they don't think that there is a creative power out there, and that's why they. I think people also have to understand before they embrace these things like, oh, the multiverse, it's so cool. There's the multiverse out there. It sounds cool. It's the trending scientific language. But what people don't realize is when they use that kind of language, they're giving power away to those atheists. Because you know why the multiverse model exists, John? Because they can't accept that the creator made our universe perfect, because our universe, the one we're in, is unbelievably perfect. It's got this, it's called the Goldilocks, universe, because everything's sitting perfectly. And the scientists rack their brains and cannot accept that it would just like that happen, The only way they can explain it is if they add the element of infinity to it, which means anything can happen, and the element that they call a cosmic foam. There's this constant manifestation out of the dark matter that every second billions of universes are created, and there's an infinite number of universes that could happen, hence the multiverse. And by chance, of course, one of them is going to be the one that we live in, right? So that's the only way they can accept it. So if we're using that kind of language, we're giving our power away. We're saying, hey, the creation, it's an accident.
And isn't it interesting, Frank, that these people work at places like the Max Planck Institute? And what did Max Planck say? I mean, go back and listen. He came to the conclusion that nothing is explainable unless you factor in an all-intelligent prime being, a higher power. And actually, he in his time, totally merged spirituality with science and said, it doesn't work unless you bring them together. I think this is what's happening here. I think we're returning to that inner standing. So it's very powerful. It's a powerful momentum. And I just encourage people to, stay vigilant in terms, like you say, that's what I always say. The reason why we have to keep uncovering and keep speaking truth and keep staying the line, stay true to it, is because there's 1% off the course will still get you in the wrong place. It doesn't matter if you're 1% or 10% off, you're going to end up in the wrong place. And that's why when we don't uncover and discern properly, we might, unconsciously maybe or subconsciously support something that we actually don't want because we don't realize what it is. And like multiverse.
And you can't help it. I mean, we're all guilty of it, right? So the only thing you can do is you can correct your perspective. You can learn the truth, and you can correct this is how true science should work. We're all like mini scientists here. We're learning to understand our world and our reality. And when we make when we realize that we've made a false, we've built a certain ideology upon false pillars, we have to throw it away and correct the path, or we're going to stay in that direction. And maybe we should, I don't know, we're probably not going to have time today, but we should do another show just on this, because that boils down, I talked about the external world, the materialistic world of scientists, and what you just described with Planck was the interior, the micro world, the quantum physics world. And to date, there is no bridge between the quantum physics world and the materialist outside macrocosm out there. They just can't, they don't, gel. In fact, the amount of error, there's actually a number to it. The cosmologists basically have figured out that the amount of errors in their theory about cosmology, about the universe, usually when you're off by a factor of 2 or 10, maybe you can say, okay, well, the experiment's kind of it lost. We should start over. Well, they're off by a factor of 10 to the power of 120. Okay. So I want to spend some time, but it's a bit of a thing that's worth going into a little deeper than just kind of haphazardly in 5 minutes. We can go into that because it boils down to geocentrism, versus heliocentrism. And I don't mean geocentrism in terms of flat Earth, because a lot of people identify geocentric models with flat Earth. It actually isn't. I'll explain why. I can explain all that stuff, and show you what it means. What it actually means is more that the difference between, the materialists who are atheists, who cannot accept the creator, they look at consciousness as being a complete accident. Rocks and molecules bang together, and within one of those infinity multiverses, at some point they'll hit in the right combination and they will, sprout human consciousness, which is again just an accident of their form of natural environment. And then the opposite, which is geocentrism, which is to say, no, we are special, that humanity is special, and it's actually situated in a very special place in the universe itself. And there's been very new data that's come out in that respect too, which we should get into as well. But I think before we close today, maybe we can talk about some of I wanted to show this because we know J.J. Hertog, and oops, this is not the one. This is it here. J.J. Hertog is the man who was taken aboard, you could say, or vanished for a couple days. And he brought back with him a download, which he calls the Keys of Enoch. And this was in 1982. So we're talking 40 years ago. And I had to, when Dieter showed me this, I had to laugh because essentially, listen to this. It says, this is key 118. It says, number 7, there is presently occurring a space-time overlap with the higher evolution as the Earth's solar system enters an electromagnetic null zone, a vacuum area in space which will change the magnetic forces of creation. Okay, and then he goes on in 8, the change of the electromagnetic density in the Earth's atmosphere will activate some species to become more violent and others more Christ-like. Now, again, the two timelines, right? As man is pulled either into an upward spiral of light or negated by the breakdown of the old electromagnetic frequency. This will bring about a complete reorganization of the Earth's life system as the human creation begins to operate with a new magnetic and electromagnetic creative power. And the final one, which isn't that necessary, but I thought it was interesting to add, presently there is also a galactic war and house cleaning that is being completed throughout the universe, which will advance some forms of population 1 intelligence to population 2 star regions and recycle those forms of population 2 intelligence which have used their knowledge to create aberrations in the heavens. How's that? Pretty far out, right?
I don't know. It kind of reminds me of where we're in right now. It's kind of like, well, damn, sounds like 2022 to me.
And then here, the J-Rod I was talking about earlier left us this message over, like this going back to the last century, right? When they first communicated with the J-Rods, which are us and future humans coming back in time. They said, transpersonal awareness is experiencing your relationship to the wholeness and connection of other souls and connection to the universe. It is the natural connection between the spark of divinity, that is your conscious soul, with any of the chaos and intelligence of creation. This awareness is expressed through the enlightenment of the internal conscious awareness capacity to be in direct, receptive, sentient, and sensorial union with any and all of the spiritual and material aspects of any object of perception. This skill is available to everyone. It is possible without anything other than childlike humility to truly wake up and see what is, and not what you expect or want. This is sharing connection, riding the quantum entanglement currents between everything in the living universe, that is, discovering how all of creation is available to be connected with your own consciousness, if you truly invite it and intend it and allow it to become its agency. Very, very powerful stuff there. Language, which of course was very complex back in that time, which only really makes sense right now. And the J-Rods were really only ever talking about a transition. They came back for the transition that was going to be taking place now. So, John, we're right in it. We're right smack in that sweet spot.
We are. And one thing has been true since the beginning of it all. Truth will absolutely make us free in this journey. And like here in the J-Rod transmission, that was it, to look at what is, not necessarily what we want to project onto, but to look at what is. And like you said earlier so eloquently, this looking at what is the only possibility to actually change the course to what we really desire. Because if we never know what's under the carpet, under the blanket of darkness and deception and lies, we will never be able to truly make that choice. And we're at this pivotal moment. It's, if we had this conversation 10 years ago, we simply couldn't have gone here yet because the experience wasn't there yet. But now it's here. And
No.
I'm sure you see this everywhere you go. You told me before we hit the record button, the connection with people in the room, other beings that are curious and interested and open and expanding. It's something that's so important right now. Family, community, togetherness. What are your thoughts on that?
Man, it's so important to do those simple things. And that really is like connecting with the neighbors or having barbecues or reaching out, because it's going to come down. I think what everybody can unanimously agree on is that if and when the worst case scenario comes, and it is, some kind of a shift, the pole shift, physical shift, or even a breakdown. Like, we've put a lot of time into talking about universal basic income and the crash of the financial system and all this stuff that they have planned or they want to do. Let's say they actually pull it off. I mean, it's really going to come down to local stuff. It's the people that have connected locally, that have some place that they can go to and connect with each other, to put up, a final barrier, if you want to call it, on one level, or just, to form the new basis of the new earth, the new communities that we need to build. And we don't know what the outcome is going to be. Are we going to be thrown back to the Stone Age? I mean, that's happened in the past. We can see that. There's evidence of that. But, there's also a lot of people cheering us on, including the J-Rods and including the universe and other dimensional beings, you could say, that are expecting us to make this leap, and they're helping us. They can't interfere with us. We have free will. We have free will to screw it up too. But I think we also have help, and that help is coming from input, spiritual input, psychic input from the universe, and all these frequencies that I just showed us that we're getting is only there to tune us, to amplify the ability for us to have those abilities to tune into that knowledge, that information. And so reaching out to our local friends and family in our community and having a kind of a game plan so that when the S hits the fan, we're not stumbling around in the dark. We're not panicking. We're not blind. I think a lot of people will be surprised that when it really comes down to a heavy drama, when it's so over the top, those who are awakened, even slightly already, they're going to switch on. And they're going to get calm, and they're probably going to go, okay, it's happening. And so they're going to take a breath and move into it, collected, calmly, and, with their senses about them. And that's what we should be practicing. And that's what we should be visualizing, for when that happens. At the same time, of course, we should never stop visualizing the world that we want, the permaculture gardens, the communities where, we're living among fruit trees, and everyone's got their own vision. But we need to feed the field, as they call it. We need to feed that field with those visions, because that's how we manifest the other timeline. Otherwise, the other timeline of the materialism will keep growing and growing, and eventually the NPCs will flush us down the drain with them into this consensus that we haven't resonated with, but there's not enough of us strong enough to pull out of it. And I don't believe in the model. In fact, I want to show a picture of that. This is kind of how I depicted it. This is kind of what's happening. You could say that these are the two timelines that are active right now. We're on the 3D Earth, and yet at the same time, we're already straddling the 5D Earth. Many people will confirm that. We're living in both of these worlds right now. Some people are already much more advanced into the 5D awakening. They're getting knowledge. They're manifesting abundance. They're peaceful people, right? They're love-centered people. And then on the matrix end of it, in the 3D, we've got, the intensification of lack and people that are ignorant and people that are suffering, right? There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of suffering going on in the world right now. Let's not fool ourselves. And there's war going on, and there's threats of him. I'm living in the zone right now where if Putin, he's preparing for a third world war scenario. I mean, they're openly talking about this, right? So we're at this point right here. And, that's why I put a question mark there, because we are going to decide which timeline will it be. Because one of them is going to be the one that's going to turn into the new age timeline, the new world that we've been expecting, that we've been prophesizing. And we want to be on that timeline, but we can't be on it alone. It can't just be me and you, John, and our friends. It's like, it doesn't work that way, right? There has to be a sort of a certain consensus and a focused, spiritually centered group of people. A small group of people has always been what has changed reality. Not the massive unconscious people. They will follow. They will follow suit with the direction that the conscious people are visualizing and creating. So we have to believe in our power as creative beings, and we have to believe that we're getting help from the universe, and we have to just hold on to the very end, no matter how crazy it's going to get. Just believe it. Know it. Better than believing. Knowing is better, right? Believing is like leaves on trees. They fall off and you grow new ones. But knowing that we're going to make it and anchoring that. Remember that, one of the messages that we were getting from these interdimensional beings was that we are frequency anchors. And that the fact that we have that frequency of higher consciousness, we are rooting it here in that, in that 3D, 5D bridge right now. That's what's going to determine what frequency wins out in the end.
Beautifully put, Frank, Jacob. Amen to that. I think this is a beautiful vision that we all need and should and keep holding in our hearts and our spirits and our minds. Thank you so much for another Quantum Leap conversation. Thank you for bringing this to all of us and for expansion. This is really what's happening every time. So thank you again for taking the time. And of course, we'll have you back very soon so we can continue, because there's much more to share. I think there's much more to share and greater understanding, which will allow us to solidify and manifest the vision even better.
Awesome. We'll do it, John.
Thank you, my brother.
Take care. Keep doing the good work. Keep fighting the good fight.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And Inspired Tribe, thank you again for joining us, for being with us. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll be back with you again very, very soon.